Welcome to episode number 86 at the BS Machine, guys. And I've got a really cool guest on today. And I've actually known Mr. Paul Archer for a number of years. And just even before he comes on, I'll let you guys know how I got to meet Paul. When I first started teaching yoga at the Yoga Tree here in Melbourne, Australia. If you guys are here in Melbourne, Australia, you probably know the Yoga Tree. But I met Paul years and years ago, probably just maybe six years ago when I first started teaching. And I remember I went to his class and I'm like, wow, how cool. Like this guy actually knows the intricacies of the body. He knows the intricacies of energy, and he just knows his shit. I mean, if you've been around the yoga scene in a while, like I guess over the last 6 to 10 years, there's definitely a lot of great teachers, but there's not many that actually know the true ins and outs of yoga. And Paul has recently gone as far as writing a book on the esoteric science of restorative yoga, and that's one of his specialties. If you're in Melbourne, you've definitely been to Paul Archer's class, and he does trainings and he gets invited for speaking gigs and all sorts of stuff around restorative and yin type yoga. And in this book, if you're on YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, I'll hold it up. It's called The Esoteric Science of Restorative Yoga, Lost Technology of Consciousness. Paul Archer, welcome to the BS Machine, mate. Such an honor to have you on.
Well, thanks, Tommy. A pleasure to be here.
Very cool, man. So yeah, Paul, I mean, obviously we've known each other for a while. We sometimes speak, sometimes we don't. But I was quite surprised when you popped up a couple of months ago and we started chatting again. And you're like, dude, I'm an author now. I've written a book and it's all getting published and it's all done and it's all rocking. So mate, tell us, what are you doing? Like, you obviously kicking ass. Well done.
Thanks, mate. Thanks. It never started out to be a book. That wasn't my intention, although I've been a writer for a long time and tend to write articles on different topics and publish them out on Medium. So I've always loved writing and really the way of expressing things in a good way, in a relatable, understandable way for people, which, you know, as you and I would both do in classes, it's really about getting the message across in a way that's not too technical, in a way that people can understand and resonate with. That's probably the most important part of teaching. You can be super technical. If I start talking about the piriformis, I immediately exclude about 3/4 of the class because they don't have anatomical knowledge. And so, you know, just using simple language to really convey the message has been key to my teaching and the way that I deliver the message to my classes or my students or in general, really.
Yeah. No, I get it, man. And that's one of the key things about yoga. I think the biggest reason why people don't get into yoga is because they have a fear that one, physically that they're not up to scratch, but two is that you have to be some spiritual fucking guru to land in the yoga class. And you know, one of the things I always got this feedback in your classes, and even when you mentioned Paul Archer in the yoga community, people always say, oh my God, he's got the most soothing voice ever. And it's like and just for those of you listening that don't know what restorative yoga is or yin yoga is, it's a very gentle practice. So if you ever are looking to try out yoga, it's such a great introduction. But then as well as it being an introduction, it also on the other end, if you're a seasoned yogi, restorative yoga is such a powerful practice. And I mean, why is it so incredible, Paul? I mean, why is it such a cool practice?
I guess of all the modalities over the years that I've taught, I found that people, you know, were shifted so much by restorative. A lot of people would come out of their first restorative class or dropping into their parasympathetic nervous system, possibly even for the first time in their lives. And something has really happened and they're not expecting it because we're literally on the ground. We're not moving. They haven't sweated. It's all about bringing your system down and into balance, finding homeostasis. And we're affecting our energetic systems, our internal organs, our brain waves. Like, we're shifting in ways that we don't normally do. They're autonomous. They kind of happen without our intention or without our control. So the people come out of it, and the most common thing in especially if they're new students to restorative, that they say, is it all right if I sit here for a minute? Like, they're taken aback by it. You know, there's almost a kind of dizziness, or it's almost like they're stoned. They come out of it and go, whoa, what just happened here? Like, how did that practice affect me so much? So it's very profound for people, and they can come out of things like chronic pain, stress cycles, injuries. And, you know, sometimes we're trapped in a cycle of injury. There's a kind of biology of memory, much like phantom pain, where if you got your arm cut off and you could still feel some kind of pain through it, the synapses in the brain, they're still processing the fact, and they still believe that it's there. So your injury could actually be healed, but your body's still trapped in a cycle of pain management and restriction. And sometimes all you need to do is just step out of that, even for a moment. It's kind of like holding a glass of water. You can hold a glass of water easily for a minute, but try and hold it for an hour, and it's going to become excruciating. If you put that glass of water down, even if you pick it up again, it's much easier to manage that pain or that effort. And if you keep putting it down, you could do it indefinitely. But generally, we're trapped in cycles of pain, stress, anxiety, fear. And that's why restorative is so profound for people, because it takes them out of it. And even for a moment, it's like taking a weight off your shoulders and allowing you that space to be calm. And you kind of remember that that space is always there. It's always available to us. But generally, we're not tapping into that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unbelievable, man. It's so, so true. And, you know, there's funny enough, I had a mate of mine stay with me last week. He was down from Northern Australia, up in Queensland, Northern Queensland. And he stayed with me for a week, and he was in the spare bedroom. And one of the mornings I walked into his room, and he was on the bed, and I'm like, dude, the fuck are you doing? We're similar age. He's like mid to late 40s, and he's literally got this weird thing, and he's trying to put his sock on. I'm like, dude, the fuck are you doing? What's wrong with you? He's like, oh, I'm just trying to put the sock on. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, my lower back. I'm like, right, dude, tomorrow I taught a yin class the next morning, and I was saying, mate, I'm getting you up at 6 a.m. You're coming with me to yoga. So next morning, same thing, walk in. He's like, anyway, came to a yin class with me. After yin, he's walking out going, wow, I can actually fucking move. And it's such a gentle practice. It's so beautiful. And so, I mean, before we get onto the book, in your experience in terms of teaching these restorative practices, what do you think is I mean, what's the greatest thing within it that people may not know about?
I think if we go back in time, you'll find that in the historical record, you're not seeing pictures carved into stone of warrior one or warrior two or handstand or crow or something. This is perhaps a much more modern invention. And the further we go back, the focus of yoga was more about heightening consciousness and raising our level of consciousness. And I think restorative resonates more with the kind of real purpose of it. It's not that you can't achieve that in vinyasa, hatha, yin. You know, there's absolutely benefit to be got there, but in restorative, it's really dropping into that conscious state, and you're heightening it. I mean, I kind of think of consciousness like a drop of vibrant blue dye, and our thoughts are like water. And if you put the drop into the water, it dilutes. Now, if there's enough water, maybe you don't even see the dye. The amount of dye that's there has not changed in volume or capacity. But if we were able to just withdraw the water, the dye would resume its vibrancy and color. Now, it hasn't changed, or you can't lose it, or but it can become stronger. It can become more visible, and we feel more connected. So often we're disconnected with our consciousness, and we're very much caught up in the thoughts, the emotions, the sensations, and that keeps us so busy that we feel disconnected. We haven't lost it, we've just diluted it as such with the thoughts. So as you slow the thinking down, as you come out of the thoughts even, and you really connect with it, you find that your level of consciousness and presence is elevated. And time seems to be very different in a restorative class. And another common thing that people say is, was that really an hour? Like it just went by so quickly. And so our sense of time is very much tied into our thoughts and emotions. And, you know, it doesn't, even as we move through, as you go into the book, explore the ideas that we kind of think of time as a very fixed, linear thing. But even within the atmosphere of the Earth, if you go up a little higher, they have to adjust the GPS satellites because there's a difference in the time from being on the planet and being slightly above the planet. So if they didn't, people would crash their cars or not take the turn off. So time isn't exactly as we think it is.
And a lot of people think that, I mean, how often do you hear that saying, I just don't have the time for that. I just don't have the time. I just don't have the time. And that is it's such a bullshit excuse, I reckon, because if you really think about it, what you're saying, and I believe this as well, is, you know, time changes or whatever, but time is just, it's a man-made thing. It's not something that, you know, Earth became the Big Bang and then there was time. You know, time it's a man-made thing. There is no, and so I reckon there's two ways of looking at, I guess, time or moment to moment experience. We're either experiencing a moment and then another moment or another moment, or we're experiencing one big fucking moment all in one, which would promote the experience of your past, your present, and your future is all happening right now. It's just what we're sort of focusing on. And that's what I love with your book, man, that you even go into alchemy, you go into all these things. This book is not just about restorative yoga and whatnot. You actually tackle these, I guess, higher realm or high vibration topics, but in a really, I call it cock and balls way. Like you really look at it. And so how were you able to take all these spiritual language and whatever and bring it down to a really understandable way of expressing this through your book?
I guess over the years, I have read a lot of manuals in different kind of disciplines, and I'm just an avid researcher and reader and absolutely love to read. But some of them were so difficult. They're like really hard going to read through a manual, and it's referencing this and that. And it's just a hard slog. And people probably put the book down and never really come back to it because they found it so difficult. So I wanted to present kind of theories. It's not like I'm saying I have all the answers. I've just researched things from quantum physics to the illusions of time and physicality and medical journals, the latest fascia research, and brought it in a way that's relatable to people, even using my own personal stories to kind of highlight it. And, some great quotes from different thinkers and philosophers through the ages, just to show that, people have been trying to convey this message to us for a very long time. It's not some kind of new concept, but over time, things can very easily get muddled. And the more something's repeated, the more we kind of believe it. I come back sometimes to this idea of, you're familiar with the saying, the customer is always right, yeah? And it's used a lot, right? Absolutely wrong. The actual quote is, the customer is always right in matters of taste. So if he likes that jumper, let him buy it, even if it's hideous. It's not that the customer is always right, but it's been edited down and repeated so many times that we believe that that's what was actually said. There's no context given to it. It's just presented as a way of saying, well, I'm right. It doesn't matter what I say. I'm a paying customer. And it's very kind of narcissistic that, you know, somebody could come in and tell you how to run your business. Of course they couldn't, you know. But it gives you the example of how things become diluted and twisted and, you know, over time. And then if it's repeated, if your grandfather said it and then your father said it and then you're saying it, but we're not really thinking about these things or looking at them analytically, whether it's actually true, whether it's based in fact, or it has been somewhat distorted. And sometimes I think with yoga, it's kind of like that it's Chinese whispers, because it's been passed down in the wisdom tradition for thousands of years, that occasionally someone's put their own spin on it. And then that idea has become popular and it's gone further and further along. And, you know, we're veering further and further away from the path. I mean, I taught vinyasa for so long. I was a very strong vinyasa teacher. I loved it. I'm a type A personality, but when I found yin, I was like, oh my God, this is just a beautiful introspective practice. And then when I found restorative, I was like, wow, what just happened? You know, it really took me out of myself and dropped me in. I felt my level of consciousness heightening. And, you know, if we go back to the sutras and the kind of description of yoga and even the elements or the siddhis, the kind of powers that were achieved through this heightening of consciousness, it's all there. It's all laid out for us, but we kind of dismiss that as myth. Where you know, it was never reported as myth. And in fact, when you talk about the siddhis and powers in the sutras, they're saying it's a distraction. Do not get involved in this. Yes, these powers or abilities will come to you as your level of consciousness is heightened. But if you follow that path, then you're actually getting lost. You're missing the whole point. So this ability to raise our consciousness, we also kind of raise our awareness. Like you have five senses, right? But we also have proprioception. We have we're able to sense static electricity. We know where our body is and the space around us. We have many more elements and senses than five. In fact, the Kemetic people used to think we had 365, which is huge, a huge difference. So maybe over time, with the diminishing of consciousness, if we follow the idea of the kind of cycle of ages, we've actually just come out of Kali Yuga. So we've come out of the age of kind of darkness and you know, 1/4 virtue. We're not, you know, we're just coming out of that and coming into more the age of electricity, when there'll be a bit more virtue and a bit more consciousness. And we're on our cycle all the way back into the golden age, as elucidated by our ancestors. Now, we've kind of dismissed that. We've continued to believe in this idea of linear evolution, that we are now at the highest point of human evolution that we have ever been. But if the further and further we go back, we actually find that, you know, people had different ideas of living. And I mean, we live in a time of concurrent epidemics of obesity and starvation at the same time. Is that the level of, you know, a conscious society? Whereas if we go further and further back, it was more matriarchal society. And I don't mean Amazonian women were in charge. I mean that we lived more as a community. We made decisions as a community. And, you know, perhaps we were living a more hunter-gatherer existence, but, you know, technology does not define how civilized we are, how spiritual we are. When we think of some kind of advanced civilization, if aliens came down to us, we imagine them coming in ships and creating wars and taking over. We never even consider that they may be much more spiritually evolved. And, you know, we're not defining the evolution of our society in any spiritual terms at all. We're defining it in technological terms. And that's just our own kind of perspective on it. So whether we lived in caves and lived a more nomadic hunter-gatherer existence, is tech, if they had iPhones, would that have made them a better society? I mean, how do we define what is an evolution of society?
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. It is very true. And as I'm listening, there's so much in that last sort of 3 or 4 minutes that you were talking about. And one of the key things that really stuck out for me is there is so much talk at the moment about raising your consciousness and raising your vibration and living in this place of high vibration and whatever, right? And I think that it's awesome that so many people are talking about it. But it's not what it means, because if I'm a person that's got nothing to do with yoga, I don't give a fuck about spirituality or crystals or fucking color yoga and this and that and the other, right? And I'm just living my life. And all these weird fuckers are yapping on about high vibration and, let's get you to high vibration, your thoughts, your emotions, your intentions, all this type of stuff, right?
Sure.
But one thing that I think is really missing, which I reckon that you nailed in this book, because you brought it back to a normal way of looking at things. But one of the main questions that I believe is not properly covered is, how the fuck do I raise my vibration? Like, how? It's all good. It's like, hey man, raise your vibration. Well, fuck off. Tell me how. Like,
Sure.
how do we raise our vibration? What do we do?
Well, the book didn't actually start out to be a book. The Australian Yoga Academy approached me about running their restorative training. And so I said, sure, but, let me do a proper manual. And so then we got closed down for lockdown, and then we got extended. And so the manual, I'd finished the manual, but I just kept going with the research, and much more stuff started leaking in. And I started to really get this vision of it being more than a manual, that it being accessible to everyone, to general public, that it wasn't just for teachers. And I could turn it into an actual book that gave people simple tools, because they didn't have iPhones thousands of years ago, but they used their own body, they used their breath, they used, were able to alter their brain waves, heighten the level of consciousness that they had with exactly what they have with us, with this physical vessel that we use. So throughout the book, it's interspersed with different techniques that you can use that are very simple, different practices. And, I come back sometimes I teach the kids down here at King David School as well for their wellness program. And I come back to them, they're sometimes skeptical of yoga. And I say to them that, things that don't work, they fade out very quickly. If we go back to the Wild West, they were selling snake oils to cure everything. But where's snake oil now? It's nowhere. It barely works on anything, certainly doesn't cure everything. So over even one generation, it fades out because it doesn't work, and people look for something that does work. Whereas yoga has lasted, potentially 5,000 years, and it's been passed down, not because it doesn't have an effect, but exactly because it does.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I felt like you wanted to keep going on that.
Sure, I can.
In terms of yoga, like you didn't feel like you finished.
Yeah, well, I'm Irish. There's no such thing as a short story.
Yeah.
When we bring our practice into our lives, and it doesn't have to be some complicated thing. I wanted to create a book that really allowed people to be at home. Maybe they don't do yoga, maybe they don't resonate with yoga, but they can still do those practices at home. So
are you saying that with this book, Paul? So like with your book, people will go out and buy it and read in and whatever else, and so in this book, your average, let's say average Joe Blow, whether it's a he, she, whatever it is, but average Joe Blow will, out of this book, they'll be able to do these practices at home and raise their vibration.
100%. And it's not even like they have to have some kind of technical ability or even the yoga tools that you may find at a studio, like a bolster, a block, a strap. You can roll up a blanket or use a pillow, and there's your bolster. You can take some kind of thick book or even plastic container from your kitchen and use that as a block. Everybody has a wall that you can use. So you already have all the tools you need. It's not like you have to go out and get kitted up in Lululemon stuff just to, to be able to practice this. You can do it at home. My landlord, he lives out the front here in the other house, and he's had terrible problems with sleep and his legs, and he's getting old now. He's in his 80s. And so I prescribed him a few restorative poses to do that he can simply do at home, and like Viparita Karani with legs up the wall and some support underneath it. And now he does it every night because because it works for him. So very, very simple tools. He's never done yoga in his life, but he asked me for advice and I gave him some advice, and now he does it every day because it works for him and it alleviates the problems. So, restorative really is beneficial for people who are going through stuff, whether it's emotional stuff, physical stuff, stress, anxiety, breakups. It can really bring people back to their essence. And this is so important because we get scattered, we get fractured and distracted in our mind. And it doesn't have to be airy fairy, only positive vibes, like kind of toxic positivity. It's, I call it the esoteric science of restorative yoga, because what I'm asking a lot of questions in the book, but what I'm basing it on is the kind of scientific research that's been done that kind of, gives a solid basis to the facts. And, I'm bringing quantum physics in and how it relates to stuff that's been said for thousands of years, whether it's in the Buddhist ideology or the sutras. And what we're finding now is at the cutting edge of our technology, quantum mechanics and quantum physics, that these ideas of, transference and, awareness affecting things, this has been spoken about for thousands of years. But how did they know this without all the kind of technological stuff we have now, microscopes, CAT scans? How were they able to understand those things long before they had technology? And to me, the answer is, it's why I put that subtitle in, The Lost Technology of Consciousness. There's only one way that they could access this knowledge. And much like you said earlier about time, that, time isn't this kind of linear perspective. The past, present, and future are existing at the same time. It's only our perspective. Like if you think of it like a movie reel, we're seeing one frame at a time running in this linear pattern, but the movie reel exists as a whole at the same time. It's just our perspective that delineates time as moving in a certain direction.
It's so funny when you look into it. It's just when you actually think about time and it is true. And look, at the end of the day, you could bring it down to be as simple as if you feel like shit and you go to a yoga class, you're always going to feel better afterwards. You're going to walk out of there going, I don't know why, whether it's science, whether it's this, whether it's awareness, whether it's vibration, I don't give a fuck. I just feel fucking good, and that's basically a pretty good science, if you ask me.
Absolutely. If it works for you, like I wanted to give people the tools to try it. And, there's nothing to lose in trying it. If you're trapped in chronic pain, anxiety, overthinking, some kind of injury that's gone beyond the point that normally it would heal, which is when we start to call injuries chronic, that, you can try. Maybe you're taking pills, maybe you're going to doctors, maybe you're, just struggling to find some kind of relief. But for thousands of years, we've understood that the strongest method of healing and is activating your own internal healing systems. Even the drugs that we manufacture, they tend to mimic what the body can produce already. So we realize that antihistamines, anti-inflammatories, your body is capable of producing these chemicals, but generally we're not able to do it on demand. So we copy those in labs and we produce them, and then we just take pills. But your own healing ability is the most powerful healing aspect, and often we're not even tapping into it. This is our parasympathetic nervous system. we're so busy that I kind of relate it to like your engine oil. Now, your engine oil is going to help your engine last longer, run better, but you're not going to change your engine oil while it's running. If you even try and take up the cap, it's going to explode in your face. So we need the engine to stop. We need the engine to cool down. Then we can put in engine oil. So it's the same thing with dropping in to parasympathetic. It doesn't switch on when you're busy doing the next thing, like you said, never having enough time, always moving, what's next, you know, and it's very easy to get caught in that cycle. So when you pull out of it, I mean, when people begin, they may only get 1 minute in an hour class of dropping into parasympathetic activation, but that minute's so powerful. Next time it'll be 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And it might be 5 or 10. And the more that you walk that path, the more you kind of carve it out. And so it's easier to get there next time. You stay there longer, you get more benefit out of it. And, you know, either these things work for you or they don't. It's experiential. Try it. If, you know, you've nothing to lose, but you may have a lot to gain. Like if we go far back into history, the ancient Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, the very first iterations of hospitals were called asclepions or dream or sleep temples. Now, Hippocrates, who we'd consider as the father of Western medicine, like doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, he trained in these. Now, this was about dropping people in to their parasympathetic and starting them like almost a kind of hypnotic, a gentle hypnotic thing where they would take them out of whatever was going on and drop them in. This would help heal them. It would also help the doctors diagnose what was going on with them. These are our first iterations of hospitals. And yet we've moved away from that, and we've gone with our technology and our ability to mass produce chemicals and drugs. And you know, we're kind of going further away from it, but our own healing ability is the strongest healing action that we have. So if we just ignore that, we're missing out on a lot of stuff. It tends to cost a lot of money, taking medicines the whole time, and they may just be a Band-Aid that you're putting on. Yes, you can take steroids if you're in chronic pain and you don't feel that pain, but you could further injure your body because you're not feeling it anymore. That, you know, it's just masking the pain rather than addressing it and fixing it. So I wanted to, you know, that I had found ways of activating my own healing. I see it in the students. It's definitely the most profound results, people coming out of a class. And, you know, I mean, it's different for everyone, but the commonalities of shifting from that trapped cycle of pain response and just continue. We're like a hamster on a wheel when we're locked in it. You know, if you think that you have a sore tooth, we kind of obsess over it. We touch it. We go, oh, is it sore? let me touch it again. 2 seconds later. Yes, still sore, you know?
True that.
Like we just obsess over it when we have a strong sensation, especially something like pain. So being able to step out of that for a moment can be such a weight off for people. It really allows them to go, we break the cycle. And then the more that we do it, we can actually step away from it, and eventually it's just gone. It just disappears.
Yeah. And usually the physical pain is really a byproduct of the emotional turmoil. And this, you know, this thing that you're talking about the hamster wheel and overwhelm and anxiety and depression and all this type of stuff. It's just so rampant in our community at the moment. And it's like, the funny thing is what I'm myself finding, not just with my coaching clients, but also most of the fucking world. It's like people are striving. It's like, oh my God, let's get there. But when they actually get there, they don't realize that, how about I've just created this cool shit in my life. Let's just, give some gratitude. Like, wow, like, look what, let's land for just a moment. And that's what restorative yoga especially allows you to do. It brings you out of the chaos, and all you really have is your body, the four corners of the mat. You've got whoever's leading the class and your breath, and you're just there. And there is no one to fucking pay. There's no one busting your balls. There's no one to feed. There's no one asking you to do shit. There's no judgment. It's just you and the mat and the breath. And that in itself is such a fucking gift.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. I mean, try to focus on your last breath. Try to focus on the next breath. It's impossible. If you focus on the breath, you're focusing on that breath, and it's literally dragging your consciousness, usually kicking and screaming into that present moment, which we tend to avoid. In fact, our brain, and this is part of the kind of science of it, that when we go into the studies of the brain, that our brain rewards us. It creates an opioid response or reward for being distracted, for finding the next shiny thing. So, we're being present, and then there's a sound or a sensation or a thought or an emotion. And if we look at that, we actually get benefited. We feel good. The brain gives us this reward. And so we get caught in this feedback loop of being constantly rewarded, kind of like getting likes on your Facebook or something.
Yay!
The same kind of programming in the brain.
I want more likes. Get me more fucking likes, man. I need more likes. Oh man, that's awesome, Paul. And so, I mean, and you've got a yoga studio here in Melbourne as well, in Carnegie, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just left my brain. What's the studio called?
Yoga Sita.
That's it. Yoga Sita. It's a really, really beautiful studio. I love what you're creating, Paul. I mean, there's not many people that in the world that have, that organically just produce a really epic book, and you've done it. So, guys, if you're listening, and whether you're into yoga, not into restorative yoga, whether you've tried it, not tried it, I highly recommend. Just get your hands on this book. So how do they get the book? Is it through Amazon, or who'd you publish it through?
Yeah, it's published on Amazon. There's an ebook version. The audiobook version is coming soon.
Yeah.
And you can buy it at my studio at AYA. And where else have I got? I've got a couple of studios, and we're talking to bookstores at the moment. Some of the more kind of progressive bookstores, they like to take independent authors if they value it, or if they think the book is worthwhile. And I tried to make it not long and accessible to people. The chapters, they're only about 7 pages long, so it's not some overly extended kind of self-deprecating or self-promoting thing. It's literally the facts and questions and the evidence. And like, what I really wanted to do was try to transpose my understanding through teaching and my own personal practice. And I give one thread, and then another thread, and another, and another. And these things interweave together, and hopefully that you would understand these kind of ideas, because I've tried to break them down into the simplest kind of form and relatable language that is not too technical or going to exclude anyone. But over time, as you add each layer of it, that it kind of forms this tapestry of knowledge, and you come out of it understanding yourself better, understanding how your brain works, your brain waves, understanding consciousness and the practice and the benefits of the poses and the practices, because sometimes that helps. We want to intellectualize things, we want to understand, and we're very much about science these days, and we want proof. We don't just want someone telling us, oh well, it's a spiritual practice that you should just do. Well, why? What's the benefit? What's the proof behind it? Where's the science and the understanding? So I really wanted to bring that through, and hopefully it resonates with people, and that it's interesting and engaging, because I haven't made it too technical, and I've put a lot of effort into reading all these kind of physiology articles, medical articles, and they're hard slogs, but I've taken the key elements and principles and tried to break it down into small digestible little chapters that help you understand, and you can come out of it going, yeah, well, I get that. I never realized that.
So good, man. Well, you should be very proud of yourself, because this is an epic book. So guys, if you're out there and you're looking for a good book to read, and you know, hopefully the audio book's coming out soon. The Esoteric Science of Restorative Yoga, Lost Technology of Consciousness by Paul Archer. If you are on YouTube, you can see the book right there. And I also put the notes in the podcast episode notes. But other than that, if you're in Melbourne, Australia, go down and do a class with Paul at his studio at Yoga Sita. And also, if you want to, if you're a yogi and you want to do some of Paul's, you know, the restorative yoga, you're holding, what's it call it? Bloody trainings. Yeah, you're doing trainings. So you're doing them at AYA and at Yoga Sita, yeah?
Yeah, we're in the middle of a yin teacher training at the moment. And then I have a restorative training running from the 2nd of next month to the 10th. So over 2 weekends, 25 hours. And we go very much in depth into it. And, you know, to teach something, like if you want to see how much you don't know something, get up and try and explain it in front of a whole group of people. You'll see where you trip up. You'll see where your knowledge is lacking. So it's very much giving you the tools and understanding. I mean, you've got to go through this and you've got to practice it yourself and make those observations. That's what makes you and me a better teacher. You know, that we are teaching and cueing from our own practice, from our own experience. That's the most powerful way of teaching. So that one's running from July 2nd to the 10th over the 2 weekends. And then AYA have very graciously asked me to run their yin course as well. So I'll be doing another yin course later in the year there, and then a restorative course immediately after it.
Awesome, mate. Thank you. And if you are, like, a lot of my listeners are all over the world, like the US and Europe and stuff. So, and I don't know, I've got a heap of listeners from Jakarta, and like, I don't even know how I got those dudes, but wherever you're listening in the world, you can just get Paul's book on Amazon. All the notes will be in the episode notes. But other than that, man, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your time and you know, going deep into what you're doing. It's so cool. I love chatting to people that are here to make the world a better place, and it's an honor to have you on, mate. Thank you so much, Paulie.
Thank you, Tommy.